Hey, howdy warriors. This is our first lecture for week 1 in our technical communication for aviation class. I'll show you the textbook real quick. Technical Writing Simplified. It's 4th edition. This was written for community college level for technical writing courses, so this is just right for us. We're going to learn a lot about our technical and our personal professional communication skills. This is not English 1301 or whatever the equivalent is where you took that at your community college. This is a specialized writing course. So the goal here is to help you become a better persuader, a better writer. You're going to, as a manager or as a leader, you're going to be writing lots of reports. You're going to be trying to convince people, persuade people. So that's what the goal of this class is, to help you do that a whole lot better. All right, so I'm going to put my picture out here, and we're going to get started on our presentation. Okay. Technical and Professional Communications for Aviation, Week 1, Professionalism and Ethics. Here's what we're covering this week. This is everything in Chapter 1 of the book. Thinking logically, citing sources and avoiding plagiarism, copyrights, using plain language, defining communication, and criteria for writing in a professional and ethical manner. All right, let's get going. Thinking logically, very important, especially when you're trying to persuade, right? The point of a lot of the writing we're going to do in here and your final project is a persuasive presentation. So let's talk about thinking logically real quick. You're going to gain credibility in your communication when you present yourself as a logical and organized thinker, all right? One of the fastest ways to lose that credibility is to use logical fallacies. That's essentially where you sound like you know what you're talking about, but really it's betraying a lack of communication skills. It's kind of a national pastime of our country right now. If you spend any time in social media, you see a lot of fighting, and both directions. That's not a political statement. That happens in every direction. Unfortunately, a lot of that is being fueled by the use of logical fallacies. Okay, people often will resort to a logical fallacy when they feel they're losing an argument. They get a little desperate, get backed into a corner, and they start pulling out their big guns, or if they grasp for understanding of the subject in the first place, but they're trying to sound like an expert. Okay, it's kind of the gotcha moments. If your point in communication is to say, "Aha, gotcha," do the mic drop and turn around and walk off, you're probably using logical fallacies, and guess what? You're probably not going to be persuasive at all, right? We've seen that plenty of times. People who dig in and just want to fight aren't really there to convince anybody. They're just there to, I don't know why they're there. Anyway, that's not what we're going to do in this class. Okay, here's some examples. The book has many more, and I want you to get into them and take a look at them. We've got appeals to emotion. Authority, that's where you say, well, my dentist says that, you know, my dog's food should come from XYZ company, okay? What does your dentist know about dog nutrition, right? And by the way, the examples I'm going to use, I'm going to try and keep them as neutral as possible. I don't want to get bogged down in any kind of political debates in our class. We're here to learn about writing, not getting fights or arguments, okay? All right, oops. You've got the either-or argument. Things are usually, well, actually, this one goes in there with it too, oversimplification. An either-or argument really is an oversimplification. Usually there's not only one or two, or there's not just two options in a debate or in a controversy or in a topic, okay? We live in a complex world. Reducing everything down to A or B is not terribly productive and is a pretty sure sign that you're using a logical fallacy, okay? The ad hominem attack, that's the I feel like I'm losing this argument, so I'm going to personally attack you. You're stupid because you think X, okay? Well, has no business in an actual communication between two adults. All right, and then there's the straw man, which is where you start to attack things that the person is not even defending. Start changing the subject, essentially. The textbook has a lot of great examples. I want you to get into those. When we have our first quiz, I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to expect you to be able to peg which one goes where. All right? And just for fun, when you're done or when you get a chance, take a break and Google referee logical fallacies. These are brilliant. Here's an example. False causality on the offense. Coincidence illegally substituted for proof. These are funny, they're clever, and they're spot on. Whoever made these things, they've been out for a little while, does a great job, and they're really entertaining. All right, and useful. So go find those. Okay, let's move on. Citing sources and avoiding plagiarism. Another way to gain credibility is to rely on quality sources for facts or data. All right, we're not just going off of our opinion when it comes to persuasive writing. Your opinion is a tool you can use when you're doing the other stuff that we just talked about. All right, but when it's time for persuasive and professional writing, it's time to start bringing in some experts. So it's not enough to use good sources, which is a whole other topic on its own, and we may get into that later. But they must be given credit through appropriate citations, right? A citation is when you reference where you got the information from. So if you reference another's work without citing it, you're essentially claiming it as your own thought or idea, and you have then committed plagiarism. If you check your syllabi, you'll see that that is very frowned upon. If we feel that it was intentional and deliberate, that could cost you the class. All right, so let's avoid that like the plague. In a paper, we do citations that are made with both an inline citation right after the comment has been made or the little bit of thought has been borrowed. And then we also, and that's usually abbreviated, and then we have an end of document citation. There's references or citations list at the end that will go in order of them coming through the paper. Oops. Formatting of citations, rigorously formatted by organizations like MLA and the APA. We use the APA, American Psychological Association 7th edition, just came out recently. When you're shopping for that textbook or for that reference book, I highly, highly recommend you get the one that's spiral bound. Okay, that way, as you're writing and you need to have a page open, it just flips open and stays there. It's very nice. In grad school, I had a traditional spine-bound one, and it was a real pain in the neck. It was always trying to close on me, so that wasn't fun. So go get the spiral bound and keep it forever. It's good. It's a good reference. Okay, let's talk copyrights. So when we're citing, properly citing a line or two from a book or article or other work with the proper citations is very acceptable. That's great. There are rules in APA that say if you use X number of lines, you've got to format it a little bit differently. You can't just put it in your paragraph. You have a little call-out box. We're probably not going to do any of that kind of writing in this class, but you may have done that in an English top class. It is not acceptable to take reproduce large areas or entire chapters or entire portions of chapters into your work. Even with a citation, that can be problematic. In my 3310 class, the leadership class I'm teaching, the other class I'm teaching this semester, I've made available through a link to the publisher a copy of the first and second chapters of the book. And like I just said, I'll see if I can't find one for these guys and post it in the announcements for this class. That's perfectly acceptable. It's the publisher has it out there. They've got their own link to it. They're willing to let you use the first two chapters as long as you download them. I'm not allowed to distribute them. Otherwise, I would have just downloaded them and put them, as a file in our course on Canvas. But I cannot do that. It would be reproducing a large portion of the copyrighted work. So, no, that's a bad thing. So this also includes sound, video recordings, pictures, and many other works. If you've ever been to a community event where they're showing a movie, right, like family movie night at church or whatever, they need to have permission from the distributor to do that, even if it's for free. That is usually a copyright violation when an organization does that. It doesn't even matter if it's a church. So whether they're charging or not, they are showing a public work. If it's in your living room and it's some friends, no worries. But if it's in the gym or the fellowship hall and you put a blanket public invitation out there, you're going to need to have permission to show that work, and most people don't go there. Students and some critics or satirists can use what they call fair use for certain works, but usually only if you're commenting on the work itself. You're not just showing the work, you're showing a clip or a portion of the work so that you can talk about it or discuss it in your commentary. I had a project in grad school where I used some clips from some Disney cartoons and a Disney TV show to make a point. Posted my project to YouTube, and their sniffers and scrubbers saw that, and it actually got blocked. I had to petition and claimed fair use so that it could get unlocked and I could get my project evaluated by my professor. And fortunately, that worked. As soon as I sent in my petition, it said, "Hey, this is fair use under blah 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 citation," and they unlocked it. So it can be done. Okay, Creative Commons licensed works are easier and safer to use in your work. We are going to have a section in this class where we are doing some graphic work, some graphic layout, and some visual components to visual communication, and you'll probably be looking for some pictures to put in those. I will guide you through when we get there on how to search for Creative Commons licensed work for or images for your work. And then if you have any questions about copyright, you can contact our University Writing Center. There's a notification in this class over in the notifications folder, or you can go to our library for help. And of course, you can go there virtually as well. You don't have to be on campus. Okay. Using plain language. This is very important. So, have you ever read a government document? The FARs come to mind for me. Hardly plain language, right? Those, you need a law degree or at least take a law class before you can dig into those sometimes. It's what it feels like. Now, there's a good reason for that. They're being very specific. It's regulatory. That is a different kind of writing. What we want to avoid that, right? We want to forget about the $5 words. And the reason for that is that you are persuading people with your technical writing in business, okay? So you're not trying to impress people. You're trying to communicate and probably persuade them, right? So there's a great resource at plainlanguage.gov/guidelines. There was a movement by some federal workers about 10, 12 years ago to knock off this nonsense with a big fancy talk in our publications at the government level. So this was a result of that. In 2010, there was an act passed that's supposed to correct that. It's not history class. I don't care about dates, whatever. I'm just talking about it. So the main reason you want to use the plain language is you don't want to distract or frustrate the audience, right? These are people that you're trying to get to come over to your way of thinking about something. So make it easy for them. And we'll have a unit where we talk about identifying your audience in a few weeks. So it'll depend on your audience, but for the most part, you don't want to frustrate them with that. Well, you never want to frustrate them. So yeah, your goal is to communicate for persuasion. Now, you need to avoid doublespeak. There's some good examples just to keep the PowerPoint succinct. I did not bother putting these in there. They're in your textbook. I'll give you my favorite example is the pre-owned vehicle. If you've seen the Lexus pre-owned vehicle commercials, it's very hoity-toity. And they make it sound like it's, gosh, I want a pre-owned vehicle. It's a used car. Okay, let's speak plainly. There's several other, failed to meet wellness potential. They died. Okay, there's lots of good things in there. The word doublespeak comes from the George Orwell novel 1984. Told you I read for fun. While that's not a very fun read, it is a very good read. So recommend it. All right, avoid cliches. I think I've already used one in this lecture already, so I broke through my own rule. Couple of my favorites, built from the ground up. Well, duh. We usually don't start building things up in the sky and work our way down. So that's kind of a silly cliche. And then my all-time least favorite one is 1x at a time, like rebuilding America, one student at a time. That sounds terribly inefficient. Why don't we rebuild America 400 students at a time? That seems like a much better way to go. So cliches in your writing, your technical writing, really don't belong. We're trying to get to the point. Okay, so let's avoid those as much as we can. There's another one, next one in the book, and I gave this its own page because I think it's very important that we really focus on this, and that is to avoid exclusionary language. What that means is any language that is going to leave people in your audience out, whether you meant to or not. Okay, fastest way to dissuade someone from your point is to make them feel like they've been left out. Okay, and I'm not talking about being chosen last to play, tag. I'm talking about adults who are basically dismissed out of a presentation because of your poor choice of words. So you're risking alienating your audience if you're doing that. Okay. So for maximum impact, you always want to use maximum inclusion. Here's some examples. If you've got a group of 10 employees and they actually are all men, you know what? Go for it. Men, let's get this job done, right? You're rallying the troops. That's great. Guess what? If they're not all men and you say, men, let's go get this job done, you just left out a couple of people in your crew. And why would you do that? Why would you put it in that anyone in the position of being told they don't belong? Okay. The point is to get the job done. So why not say team, let's get this job done, or some other version of that. This is a great example of, you say, if someone says that woman doctor, okay, why not just say that doctor? What's the male or femaleness of the doctor have to do with anything? Women have been doctors for a long time. Or male nurse. It's ridiculous. He's a nurse. That guy's a nurse. Okay, he's a nurse. So let's just call him a nurse. And then stewardess instead of flight attendant, right? The technical term is flight attendant. When you intentionally or otherwise call somebody a stewardess in this example, you're using old, outdated jargon, and that's exclusionary. And if they perceive that it's on purpose, you've now lost them, right? And here's the thing, gang. It's not being PC, right? It's not being politically correct. It's being respectful to your audience so that you have maximum impact and you get your job done. Whatever it is you're trying to persuade them to do, you've reached them. Don't cut people out of your message, okay? That's the point of this little speech on plain language. Let's define what communication is. Where are we? 17 minutes. All right. We're good. We're rounding up here. Communication is any message sent or received, intentionally or unintentionally. That last part is very important and has a lot to do with what we just talked about with inclusionary language. You can unintentionally communicate to someone that they're not part of the team, and then they're not going to perform as well. Your job as a manager and as a leader is to maximize performance of everybody on your team. Okay? We've got other classes where we'll talk about how to do that, but when it comes to language, we want to make sure we have every advantage. Okay? So, several ways to do that. Verbal communication, oddly enough, means spoken and written. Okay? Verbal in this case means the use of words. It doesn't matter if they're coming out of your mouth or coming off of a keyboard. It's verbal communication. But let's talk, we got a whole semester to talk about written communication. Let's talk a little, we're not going to talk about spoken very much. This is not a speech class. But for max results in your spoken communications, you need to be confident, right? You can't come up all timid. You got to know your subject. You don't need to be fumbling for your talking points while you're giving your presentation. Don't use 50 words when 25 will do. Enough said. Be very aware of the audience's positive and negative cues, right? When you've got a live audience, you can really adjust. If you're confident and you know your subject, you can read that audience and you can adjust your message on the fly. If you're fumbling around with note cards, and you don't really know your message, you're not going to be able to respond to how the audience is working. Let's talk about nonverbal communication. This is about your positive and negative cues. This is the way you present yourself. Okay, negative cues. You got your crossed arms. If you're addressing the team like this, you're telling them you're kind of hacked off, or you're mad at them, or something, or it's not working for you. Rolling your eyes, right? Blank or stern expressions. It's starting to sound like anybody in this group who's got a teenager. I think I just described that, and you know how effective your teenagers' persuasive abilities are when they're implementing these negative cues, right? Not very. So the same thing's going to happen to you and your audience. All right, let's talk about some positive cues. You've got eye contact. You're going to make eye contact with everybody in the room as much as possible. When we get into our world cultures, our global perspective class, we'll talk a little bit about that. That doesn't hold up in every culture, but in this culture, in the Western culture, eye contact is pretty important. You're going to limit hand movements. I do tend to talk a lot with my hands. I'm trying to have a good example and not be doing this all the time. So limiting hand movements and a pleasant expression, right? Pleasant expression goes a long way to setting the tone for your discussion. Lots of other positive and negative cues in the textbook, so look through those. All right. Let's talk politics. Textbook just says office politics, but of course, a lot of us work in a hangar, and we know that the hangar politics can get pretty crazy. They can be good or they can be bad. Generally thought of as a bad thing, or at least not a very productive thing, right? Work with the good, even if you hate it, right? I know so many people who say, "Oh, I hate playing the political game. How could you ever go into administration? It's nothing but a bunch of politics." Well, so is management, and so is leadership. It's important to know how to use that for good, right? To become a good leader, to work with people around you. So it's worth spending some time thinking about that. Avoid the bad politics like the plague, the gossipers, the whiners, the complainers. There's a difference between complaining and bringing up something that needs attention. Huge difference, right? You can bring up the same problem in a very constructive way, or you can bring it up in a very destructive way. I guess that's a good way to talk about the positive and the negative aspects of politics in this. So there are some great examples in the text. I'm not going to go into them here. Please spend some time looking at those. All right, last thing. Criteria for writing in a professional and ethical manner. So professional communications is going to use these 8 criteria. We're going to be honest, right? We all know how important it is in our industry that we're honest. We don't withhold information. We give the full information. If we don't, then people are going to get hurt. People are going to die, right? It's incredibly important to shoot straight and be honest in all of our communications. We're going to be clear. We don't want to waste time. We don't want to leave room for confusion or guesswork. We're going to be accurate. We're going to use the right information, the right data. Be comprehensive. Cover everything, right? You don't want to write a report to your boss and then have him or her come back, the next day and say, "What about this, this, and this?" You're not doing yourself any favors. It would be better for them to say, "Hey, you don't need that much information on here. Cut back and just give me this." That's a much better interaction than "You didn't give me enough information." Accessibility. That means that that goes back to not using exclusionary language. It also goes back to using simple language. So it makes it, everybody can access this information. Oops. We're going to be concise. We want to not make it any longer than it has to be. Okay. We're going to have professional appearance both in our person and in our documents that we send out. And we're going to be correct. This is not the same thing as accurate. Accurate's talking about data. Correct means punctuation, grammar, language. Guaranteed, I will be watching that in this class. The other classes, when we're writing, it's not going to play as big a role. But in a writing class, it's going to be good punctuation. It's going to be good grammar. It's going to be good spelling. You've got tools on your computer to help you with that stuff. I would die without spell check. So be aware that we're going to work really hard on correct language and grammar. All right. Final thought, professional communication is a skill that takes practice. When cultivated, it enhances your image and furthers company goals. Okay? So this is how you move forward in your career. Good, clear communication. It's vital. So that's what we're going to do this semester, is work on that. And looking forward to it. All right. Y'all have a good rest of your day.